The Baltimore Ravens start their season 0-1 after losing to the Kansas City Chiefs in heartbreaking fashion. We talk about the biggest positives, areas of concern, and a lot more for the team coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Free and available for you all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and in audio form wherever you get your shows. So really appreciate everybody tuning in, however you're deciding to listen or watch today. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. We go live after every single Ravens game. We did that. The Ravens fell to the Chiefs by the final score of 27-20. So this is kind of the morning after show. So if you want to listen to it, again, I got a little fired up in the reaction shows. If you want to go check that out, highly recommend it. But here today, we're going to be diving into some positives, some areas of concerns, just kind of breaking down the game a little bit more and just the overall feeling on the game. Because I feel like it's a very weird feeling game, I guess, in my opinion, of just like how to feel after a game like that. So we'll obviously dive into what happened during the game and just talk about where this team is right now and where they could be going. Because obviously the team that we saw last night was not the final product of what we're going to see throughout the course of the season. So we are 5 days a week for you on Locked On Ravens. Obviously we go live after the Ravens games, as I said, but also we have our regularly scheduled programming Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. So if you want daily Ravens coverage, be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form. But let's get into the game again. 27-20, the Ravens lose. Heartbreaking, really. I mean, the Ravens, they kind of claw their way back into this one, have a couple of shots at the end zone. Lamar misses a couple of pretty decently wide open targets, right? Zay Flowers, literally no one around him, and likely he overshot a bit. But on that last play, Lamar gets it to Likely, and Isaiah Likely, it is literally just the toe that gets on the line, and the Ravens lose. Now, I think in this game, there were a lot of mistakes that were frustrating, but let's start off on a positive note. Let's talk about the positives in this game first, and then we'll get to the areas of concern in the second segment. I think, to me, it showed a lot of heart that this team battled back and fought back. I mean, this was a game that the Chiefs could not put the Ravens away. I thought the Chiefs did not play very well offensively, in my opinion. A lot of mistakes, poor play calling. Like, I did not think, even though the Chiefs scored 27, I mean, some of that was miscommunications. I'm not saying the Chiefs played like terribly, but I didn't think they played great offensively. So, to me, the Ravens, because of that, were able to kind of stick around, and this game easily could have been 21-7, right before half, essentially. But this defense held the Chiefs after, the strip sack, after the Ravens go 4 and out. Well, I guess they just don't convert on the 4th down, but regardless, and the Chiefs got the ball with pretty good field position. I mean, great field position on the strip sack, and then they got the ball around midfield on the other one. And the Ravens defense held that Chiefs offense to 6 points total, 2 field goals. When the Chiefs easily could have scored, gotten in the end zone. That game's 21-7. You're sitting there if you're the Ravens before halftime, and you're probably thinking, man, well, it is what it is. But that defense, there were some issues, but I got to give a lot of credit to Zach Gore for his ability here. There were some rough moments. There were play calling perspective, miscommunication. That defense did not play perfectly. Don't get me wrong. But in some of the biggest moments of the game, they stepped up when they needed to, getting the Ravens the ball back, to put back in Lamar Jackson's hands to go try and tie, or obviously John Harbaugh was going for the win if Likely had scored and that it counted, but to put the ball in Lamar's hands to go have a legacy drive. And Lamar, outside of those throws, I thought did a great job. But it showed heart. And we'll talk about this because we'll do a couple of bonus episodes over the weekend just because there's literally so much to talk about. I can't fit it all into just the show today. So we're gonna have to do some bonus episodes this weekend, so stay tuned. But I actually feel better about this team outside of the offensive line. I actually feel better about this team than I did going into it. Because on Locked On Ravens, I did predict the Ravens to win the Super Bowl. I said at least get there. My pick is Ravens 49ers. And on Locked On Ravens, I think it was about a month ago or 3 weeks ago. I can't remember exactly. But I had said, you know what? I have confidence in this team to go do it. Obviously, it's going to rely on a lot of things. And, we could be sitting here in a couple months and injuries happen or they're just not playing well, and that might change. But the Ravens have the pieces to go do it. They can. But part of it is going to be how they perform. Part of it's going to be on their heart and their determination. And that really wasn't a question for me, but it just reaffirmed that. Where, they clawed and fought their way back. I'm going to keep saying it because it deserves to be said. And while it wasn't a perfect game, there were a lot of mistakes that were frustrating. We'll talk about the referees as well, obviously. Obviously, I'm not blaming the refs for the Ravens' loss, but they certainly had their fingerprints on this game, right? Because I'm just not one to blame the refs totally for a loss. I don't like that excuse. But if the refs have an impact on the game, they have an impact on the game. They did. They did. So we'll get to that a little later. But I thought a really big positive in this game was the fact that Baltimore didn't give up. They didn't lay down, especially defensively when they got a couple of short fields. They did their thing, had trust and belief in each other. And that to me was a positive despite the loss, which is a really weird feeling, honestly, because I didn't think I would feel that way if they lost, like just going into this game. But there are easy things they can clean up. It's week one. Essentially, this is the Ravens preseason, right? This game was the Ravens preseason. Ravens didn't play their starters in the preseason. The Chiefs did. So this was the big tune-up, I guess, and what a heck of a tune-up going up against the back-to-back champs in a game like this, prime time opening the season. But I thought that their fight was really, I guess inspiring is the word I'll use. It was an inspiring fight they put up at the end, even if they did come up just a toe short. I also think Lamar Jackson was really impressed with Lamar's decisions over the course of the majority of the game. Not every single one, but most of them. Something we've been talking about with Lamar forever is just take what the defense gives you. Whether that's a short check down, if your first, second, third reads aren't there, go through that progression. And then if you have a back in the backfield or a guy out on the flat, just chuck it there, check it down. Just do that. Thought Lamar did that, especially on that final drive when the Chiefs were obviously playing off. They were playing soft, and they weren't letting the Ravens beat them deep in a couple other areas as well. Well, Lamar Jackson says, okay, I'm going to just check it down to Isaiah Likely. I'm going to check it down to Justice Hill. And that's what we're going to do. And the Ravens were ripping off 8, 9, 10, 11-yard gains, 12-yard gains. And it was only taken like 5 or 7 seconds off the clock, 10 seconds off the clock. That's exactly what we were talking about with Lamar. And he was doing that. He was taking the open rushing lanes when they presented themselves. He was stepping up in the pocket, not panicking for the most part. It wasn't a perfect game for Lamar, obviously, and we'll talk about that in the second part of the show. But I was impressed with Lamar's decision-making. He looked fast out there. He was decisive in a lot of things he did. And even though there were some things to clean up, I thought Lamar did pretty well, and I'm going to definitely give him credit. I thought Justice Hill played really well. I mean, look, they were using him to block Chris Jones. They were using him to block Chris Jones at the end of the game. I have no idea why they were doing that. They were putting McCary and all those guys on the inside, and they left Justice Hill one-on-one with Chris Jones, who was playing on the edge. And, I mean, Lamar kind of said it was a factor in his decision-making over those last couple of plays. He said he saw Lamar, or he said he saw Justice Hill. He's Lamar, what I'm talking about. He said he saw Justice Hill, there we go, on Chris Jones, and maybe kind of hurried that throw up a little bit. But, man, that's kind of what they were doing. Like, even Justice Hill, like, held more of his own than I thought he would, especially on that play where Lamar was going in and out, and Chris Jones was kind of like, whoa. So I thought Justice Hill played well, but obviously not just because of that, right? Just because of the fact he had 6 receptions for the Ravens. I thought he was decisive when he got the ball in his hands, was one of Lamar's safety blankets in this game, especially as a third down back. It was cool to see. Really, really credit Justice Hill for that. I think Trenton Simpson played really good football. While the secondary did have definite moments that contributed to the loss here, I thought that they had good plays as well, particularly by Marcus Williams and a couple of others. But, Ardarius Washington had a nice play in the end zone on Xavier Worthy. There were some definite plays there. David Ajabo and Travis Jones combining for a sack. The defense, it was timely. there were timely plays by that defense for the most part. Not all the time, but timely plays. I thought in the receiving game, I mean, look, we can't do these positives without talking about Isaiah Likely. 9 receptions, 111 yards, a touchdown, was all over the field, making his presence felt. Obviously, everybody was keyed in on Mark Andrews. Likely took advantage of that, took a hard fall at the end. Hopefully, he's all good there. I mean, he came back in the game and almost caught the game-tying or game-winning touchdown there. But Likely, I mean, let's give this guy his flowers, man. Like, him and Lamar did not miss a beat dating back to last year. And that is just going to cause other problems for defenses. I thought Likely was absolutely incredible. Obviously made a crazy play on the touchdown that he had. So that, Likely gets all the flowers from me. Hey, you know what? Rashad Bateman made a nice catch. A guy that wasn't targeted to end of the third quarter, I believe, if I'm not mistaken there. Comes with a huge clutch catch late in that game to put the Ravens in position to try to tie or win the game. So shout out to Rashad Bateman for that. Zay, I thought, had a pretty nice game overall. Drew a couple flags, made a couple plays. Good game from Zay. And then there were other things as well. Other things too. But obviously the Ravens did lose at the end of the game. But I thought the fight was the most impressive part for the Ravens. And it gives me a lot of confidence because, look, the Chiefs are a tough test. They're a tough test for anybody. They're back-to-back champs for a reason. But the Ravens, I think, will still have a successful year. I'm not here to overreact to a week one loss. We can be objective about it, right? Talk about the positive, talk about the negatives, and we're going to do that. So coming up with the second part of the show, we'll talk about some areas of concern for this team moving forward, areas they can clean up, stuff that went wrong, and a lot more. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. So for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, finding jobs, networking, connecting. LinkedIn has it all. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back to our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. The Ravens lose 27-20 to Kansas City. They are 0-1 to start their season. Really appreciate everybody being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen of the day. Man, it's a grind doing this, but I absolutely love it. This is my 6th season doing this, dating back to 2019. So if you're an everydayer, you've been here every single day, or at least for most of the days I've been doing this since you've started tuning in. Really appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. We give you 5 days a week of Ravens content every single weekday. I've never missed an episode. This is episode 1330 on the weekdays. Plus, we do bonus episodes, live shows after every Ravens game, Ravens piece of big news. So if you're new, want to hit that subscribe button, however you're watching or listening, video form, audio form, really appreciate you. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back into the show. Be sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Football for your second listen of the day. It's with the fantasy experts bringing you everything you need to know for your fantasy football lineups, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, areas of concern. Let's talk about it. Let's do it. I think for the Ravens, there was a lot of sloppiness. There were a lot of mistakes. But when we're talking about areas of concern, the offensive line. The offensive line is still a big area of concern for me. Daniel Falele got beat pretty badly by Chris Jones on a couple plays. Roger Rosengarten comes in, and he gets beat by Chris Jones for that strip sack. And, the run blocking wasn't great all night. Derrick Henry only gets 13 carries in this game, but outside of that first drive, really didn't make much of an impact over the course of the rest of the game. And while game flow certainly dictated Justice Hill be in the game more just based off of how it was going, it still kind of, I don't know if stung is the word, but it didn't feel great to see, the Ravens pay Derrick Henry $16 million and have him sit on the sideline in the most important part of the game, right? That's tough. Now, game flow, again, dictates what it dictates, but I would have liked to see him use Derrick Henry a little bit more. But that's another topic. That's another topic. The offensive line is going to be one of the big concern points all year. I was preparing for this. I hopefully prepared you for this, who's watching or listening. Hopefully I prepared everybody. I think the offensive line will look better as the year goes on, right? because that just is what it is. Where with stuff like this, you're going to have moments early in the season where you don't have the chemistry. You haven't played with each other. I mean, that's the thing with the offensive line too, where they were moving guys all around in the offseason, trying to find out who their guys were. There wasn't a ton of consistency. Linderbaum misses pretty much all of training camp. Like that's tough. And this is their first action as a 5. And not only that, but they're rotating guys again. And I've said it on the live show. I say it everywhere I go. I am not a fan of that. I personally do not think you can win a Super Bowl rotating offensive linemen like the Ravens do. Now, it was only on the right side. It was Patrick McCary and Roger Rosengarten. And I understand their reasons for it. Wanting to switch up timing. Wanting to, maybe for a guy like McCary, get him some rest and keep him fresh and have your guys rotating in and out. But I think you have to just pick a 5 and stick with it. And I think that 5 should be the 3 on the left and center, Stanley, Voorhees, and Linderbaum. I think it should be Ben Cleveland and Patrick McCary. I think for a contending team like Baltimore, yes, Roger Rosengarten, I think, is going to be a very good pro. And by the end of the season, he certainly could be starting. But for right now, when they're still trying to establish stuff, I'd rather take the floors of the veterans than the ceilings of the young guys. I would. I think the floor of Ben Cleveland and the floor of Patrick McCary is valuable enough to say, okay, let's not do the young guy thing right now. They are going with a lot of youth, and we certainly saw that in some aspects, particularly on the offensive line. Now, that group on the field for the last drive for the Ravens was great, and that was McCary out there. But if it's going to be Falele, fine. Like, okay, you have him out there at right guard, okay. That's your guy. But that's the thing. That's your guy. Patrick McCary, if you have him starting, that's your guy. That's your guy. It's hard to get into a rhythm because with a guy like Roger Rosengarten, because it's not even you're doing it with 2 vets. You're doing it with a rookie. So there's the whole conversation for rookies. This is more of a quarterback conversation, but it can apply to other positions where you're like, okay, cool. This guy's starting as a starting spot. He'll get into a rhythm, get acclimated. He'll learn from mistakes and this, that, and the other. Like, he'll have a lot of time to learn. And then the other side of it is, well, okay, we see sitting behind a vet for a year, he can learn and he can do his thing, not be under pressure. Rosengarten's getting both of those things right now. And that, to me, might be a little, not confusing, but that's a lot. It's a lot. So I personally wouldn't do it. Seems like the Ravens are committed to doing it. Obviously, it's kind of a against the trend thing. Like, they're trying to be innovative with it. I personally don't agree with it, but it's what they're doing. So I guess we're gonna have to roll with it. Secondary, I talked about miscommunications. Marlon Humphrey passes off Xavier Worthy to a safety. I thought it was Eddie Jackson on the broadcast. I think it's Kyle Hamilton now. I don't know exactly, so don't quote me on anybody, but I'll just say Kyle Hamilton because I think that's who I saw on the replay. But Marlon Humphrey passes off Worthy to nobody. Humphrey thought there was somebody, and that obviously is an easy walk-in throw-catch touchdown. No doubt about it. There were some other plays as well that weren't great for the secondary. It was tough. Marlon had a couple plays. The Chiefs were burning the Ravens with the Rashee Rice in the slot thing where Roquan Smith and Malik Harrison couldn't stop. But Trenton Simpson did, though. Trenton Simpson was the only guy, and I've talked up his pass coverage skills all offseason. So felt good to see him do that. But the Ravens and their secondaries, again, it's a learning thing. Now, these guys have been together longer than the offensive line has. Same concept in some ways, different concept in other ways. But the other part of it is, just the Ravens being sloppy again. Game management. The Ravens have to use 2 timeouts 5 minutes into the third quarter in the second half. How great would it have been if the Ravens had all 3 timeouts on that final drive? I think they win the game. I think they do. But your defense can't get, set, or the personnel's wrong, or there's miscommunication there, and you got to burn 2 timeouts early in the third quarter. Right? I do think the Derrick Henry usage was a little weird to me. I'm sitting here saying the Ravens, again, abandoned the run a little bit in the middle to the end of that game. And again, game flow does dictate, and the game flow kind of called for that. But I thought they could have established it more at the beginning of the game. When they go up 7-0, they use Derrick Henry 5 times on the ground. And okay, cool, first drive, that's awesome. But then he had only 3 more carries after that until halftime and finished the game with only 8 more carries after that. So again, you had 5 on the first drive and then 8 for the rest of the game. Henry wasn't really getting a lot. Like, he didn't really have a great game, honestly. Part of that was the run blocking. I don't think the run blocking was awesome. You know, he always seemed to have a guy or two on top of him pretty early, or guys getting in the backfield. But I mean, man, like, that's just it's a tough way to kind of have that be your Ravens debut. Hey, it's the touchdown. That's awesome. He had some solid moments, but again, you paid him $16 million and he's kind of sitting on the sideline there, and you're not using him. And I thought they could have established him a little earlier, because the Chiefs were doing exactly, if you've been listening to me every day on this show, they were doing exactly what we've talked about. Exactly what I've been saying was going to happen, where Derrick Henry had some good carries very early on that first drive. And the Chiefs had to start creeping guys in the box. Their edge defenders who were setting the edge on those read options and RPOs and whatever you want to call them, they were cheating in on Derrick Henry, and Lamar took that to the outside and got like a 10, 12-yard gain. And then they just like stopped. They just stopped. It's the same stuff we were talking about after the AFC Championship game, where it's like it was working and then they just stopped. Now, Lamar ended up having a really good game on the ground, and obviously Henry didn't. But, man, I'll tell you, like, that's the type of stuff I want to see more often. And again, game flow will dictate it. I keep saying game flow because it's true. But I just thought they could have done more of that, because if Lamar continues to gash him on the outside like that, then the Chiefs have to adjust. That opens back up the box for Derrick Henry. If they start to go to that again and it works, you got to creep back up into the box. Then you can work play action off of that. And the Ravens did that early in the game. And I'm like, okay, this is exactly what we want to see. And then it didn't happen from there. So, yeah, just some sloppiness all around is tough. I mean, there are obviously ways the Ravens could have won this game. And part of it is if anybody knew what an illegal formation penalty was. So coming up to the final part of the show, we'll talk about the referees, their impact on this game, and if we just witnessed an AFC Championship rematch coming up back in the AFC Championship this year. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So, one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks, because it's gone when September ends. And if you want to play PrizePicks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. So for this Ravens and Chiefs game, if you wanted to go for more for Zay Flowers in the receiving yards, or maybe you wanted to go for more on Isaiah Likely in the receiving yards, those probably would have done you well over on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDON on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. We're back our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you. Ravens lose 27-20 to Kansas City, and we're talking about it all here on this episode. Appreciate everybody for being here again and making us your first listen of the day. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Almost to 8,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're creeping up towards that next goal, so really appreciate if you were a part of that, and we're along for the ride here on Locked On Ravens. In audio form, our community is growing every single day, and the audio community has been absolutely incredible as well. So video form, audio form, social media, subtext, we have a ton of great Locked On Ravens communities, and seriously, I cannot thank everybody enough for being a part of this journey with me. It means the world. Let's talk about this. Referees. I said it. I don't love using the excuse of referees to kind of, the Ravens lost because the refs. I don't like that, because my whole thing is, well, don't put yourself in that situation. But when the refs have an impact on the game, the refs have an impact on the game. And there were just so many things that they did. So many things that had an impact on the game. And it felt like the game was not being called from both sides. John Harbaugh was very displeased with the referees. Ronnie Stanley called out the referees. Like, there were just so many things that happened here where Ronnie Stanley said, the refs told us what we were doing was good. And then tonight, Just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. So Ronnie Stanley calls out the referees. John Harbaugh's giving him an earful about how you call it both ways. The Ravens had 5 legal formation penalties in this game last night. Chiefs had 0. 5-0. They were saying, okay, Ronnie Stanley's lining up too far in the offensive backfield. But then Jawan Taylor's doing it every single snap, and they don't call. Jawan Taylor goes and is like false starting on every single play. He's leaning back. He's cheating. He's leaning back. And the refs don't call it once. They call him for a false start on a play where he just started going while everybody else was standing still. Steve Spagnuolo comes down the pipeline, calls a timeout. Assistant coaches cannot call timeouts. That is not allowed. Now, apparently, Andy Reid had called a timeout to the other guy and whatnot, but okay, then what was Steve Spagnuolo doing? He was still making a call, and you could see him kind of like tap Andy Reid and like apologize to him for it. I mean, what was he doing? What was he thinking? He can't do that. Like, even if Andy Reid had gotten the timeout in, those are the rumors, apparently. I haven't seen the actual footage of this, but apparently Reid had called the timeout, and that's what happened. But Steve Spagnuolo was running down the sideline calling a timeout. You cannot do that, and there was no punishment for it. There was no punishment for it. There was the roughing the passer on Matabike was a textbook roughing the passer, but it still was a decently soft, like, just kind of, it was hands to the face. You cannot hit the quarterback in the face, and that's what happened. Like, textbook, you cannot do that. Was it soft? Yes. There wasn't like, it wasn't like he slammed his head into the ground or anything like that. He was getting his arms up, and he hit him in the face. Soft roughing the passer call. That one is textbook, so I'll kind of let that one go, if anything. The holding call on Tyler Linderbaum was cheap, just ticky-tacky stuff. Negates a 30-yard Lamar Jackson run. Like, there are so many things. So, again, were the rest the only reason the Ravens lost? No. I think I'd be doing a disservice if I said that. But we can also acknowledge they had a huge impact on the game because it was not called both ways. It was not called both ways at all. You had Juju Smith-Schuster setting the screen down the field for Travis Kelce. It goes on and on and on and on. And this is not just a Ravens thing against the Chiefs. This is the kind of the national view of the Chiefs, is that they play by a different set of rules than the rest of the NFL. And that's kind of how it goes. But doesn't make it any easier to kind of deal with throughout the game when, the Ravens apparently were told, like, hey, you're doing this right. You're lining up in the right places in the offseason, and then the regular season comes, and that's all just out the window. So, again, refs are always going to be a problem, right? It's just I have no faith in it being restored or resolved in any way, shape, or form. But when a game like that happens and the refs certainly have their fingerprints all over it, you can't not talk about it. You can't just talk about, oh, well, the Ravens did this and did that. Well, the refs certainly played a part. So we're going to talk about it. And it was disappointing and honestly a very ugly officiating game. So, that's what I have to say about that. I wanted a little bit more of a rant on the live show. But, you can't. I mean, this is the NFL. All right. It's a league where there are going to be mistakes. It's going to happen. I expect it to happen. But it felt very one-sided. It felt very one-sided over the course of the entire game. And it was once. It didn't even feel that way. It was. So, I mean, just got to hope it's better next week, but doesn't take away the fact that played a part in the Ravens starting 0-1. But obviously there were other reasons why. It was not all the refs. The Ravens also did this to themselves. So, got to kind of chalk it up to what it is. But I do think we did see an AFC Championship rematch. I think Kansas City is going to make it that far again. I think Baltimore does too. There's motivation. I mean, Isaiah Likely is very fired up after the game. Said good luck in the postseason if that's the best he got to the Chiefs, which, those are fighting words. I'm not sure I would have said that, but you know what? Hey, I respect the passion at least. I respect that. I don't know if I would have said it, but I respect it. He offered some very nice words to Chiefs fans after the game. Spoiler alert, they were not actually nice words. But I mean, I do think that the Ravens, this was a test, and I think they're gonna have a successful season. They're going to be able to beat up on some of the teams on their schedule based off of this performance, just staying in the game the way that they did, not letting it get too far out of hand against one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen and one of the greatest coaches we've ever seen. and that team, which has a bunch of talented playmakers on it. But this, to me, I think is the AFC Championship rematch. I'm not shocked one bit if it is. One bit. And then there'll obviously be the added storylines in that game, as there always are with Chiefs and Ravens matchups over these last couple of years, and Mahomes and Lamar, and Mahomes usually getting the better of Lamar in these games. But yeah, it's just it's a brutal way to start the season. Obviously, as I say, September wins or September loss, well, both honestly, but September losses don't matter in September, but they matter in December, and that's absolutely true. So maybe the Ravens look back on this one and say, man, they were a toe away from a seed, or with their conference record or whatever it may be. But season's not over. I honestly feel fine. I feel all right. Like feeling wise, I'm upset they lost, and it feels disappointing. But about them in general, their season's not going to be defined off of this loss. There's no doubt in my mind they'll be able to bounce back. They honestly have to. I guess if they start 0-2, again, they lose to the Raiders, then we could have a different conversation. But obviously the Chiefs, they're a tough team. And one team was going to lose to another team. One good team was going to lose to another good team. That's what it was always going to be here. That's all I have for you today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to, again, subscribe on the way out. Hit that follow button on the way out. Like the video on the way out as well. We're going to have a couple of bonus episodes coming your way this weekend, because there's just so much to talk about here. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.